Hey everyone, I decided to do a spontaneous live today because I've been really contemplating this idea of living in multiple layers of reality, multiple dimensions, multiple streams of consciousness, however you want to define it. There's an experience that I have of being very connected spiritually, obviously the channeling, the spiritual teaching and guidance, all those things, and then also the practical reality of being on the earth plane. And it's a very interesting thing here, especially living in Sedona, because a lot of people I see are up here. They're connected to higher realms. They're not necessarily grounded. Some are, and it's very. It's like they are floating. It's like they live in a different dimension. And when I go outside of Sedona and I observe the way people live there, it's generally, depending on where I go, but it's generally a lot more grounded. People are more connected to a 3D reality, I'll call it. 3D meaning the practical, more dense, and I just find it very fascinating, and I'd love to hear you guys, I'd love to hear your thoughts, those of you who are joining in, thank you. Please share your thoughts and experiences about this, because what I've noticed is that the most effective people, effective in living their lives, effective in being centered and, more able to live their mission and share their mission, those people are connected to both. They're connected to their soul, the spirit realm, the higher realms, if you will, and they're also very grounded. They know how to pay their bills, they take responsibility for their life, they know how to do the practical. And I think, as I reflect on the spiritual journey and as I reflect on what's happening in the more spiritual realms, I see that people who have opened up and awakened sometimes, and I'm trying not to make generalizations, but sometimes these people leave behind their practical way of living and they're all up here and they're not effective in daily life, in actually sharing their mission or living their mission in a way that helps other people, because they just they can't ground it in. They can't bridge those two worlds. And so when I think about living in multiple layers of reality, whether you want to define it in terms of dimensions, 5D versus 3D, whatever, when I think about living in multiple layers of reality, for me, it's really important that we learn how to master being in all of them and to bridge them, to bring them together. There are a lot of prophecies about the new earth and how the old earth and the new earth will merge. And we as light workers, we as bridge workers must learn how to merge those different dimensions in our everyday lives. So when I first came to Sedona, I met this seer, and he looked at me and he said, grounding, you need to learn how to ground. And at the time I had no clue what he was talking about, because I was very grounded. I learned early on how to take responsibility for my life, my bills, paying rent, all that stuff. I took responsibility for, everything in my world, and I was very, I knew how to do things, how to make things happen. I was very independent. And so I was like, I don't know what you're talking about. And when I started channeling Prime Creator and opened up to those higher realms, those higher frequencies, those higher energies, I started to become ungrounded. And I was like, oh, this is what he was talking about. It was maybe 2 or 2.5 years later that, or whatever, I realized that when you start to open up to those higher frequencies, you must also continue to live in this dimension. We must also continue to work with these 3D frequencies, because we came here to be human, and we came here to exercise our human abilities and our abilities as creators through our human beingness. And that's something that I think is really lacking in the spiritual world right now. This is especially important as more and more people are waking up. We cannot forget our human responsibilities. We cannot forget the daily things that we go through. Yeah, we'd all love to live in bliss and joy all the time, but that's not the daily reality. And this conversation's really been mulling around in my head because I was recently I'm a co-author in a book that was recently released on Amazon. It's called All You Need Is Love, and it's about spiritual bypassing and the many different ways that we bypass feeling our emotions or dealing with the realities that are in front of us, because, we'd rather not feel the heavier feelings. We'd rather be, floating around out here. And I consider the idea of astral traveling. It's very, and like psychedelics and, experimenting with these other frequencies. I think it's very tempting for people to want to do that because, and this is my assessment, I feel that what people are actually doing is they're searching for those higher aspects of themselves. They're searching for other parts of themselves. And they're doing it in a way that gives them quicker, easier access. And I've done it in a way where I've done the deep, grounded work to do it. I've never used any substances. And that was my path. And I'm not judging those who choose to do it a different way. But my guess is that because they're trying to find more of themselves, and they don't necessarily have the tools, that they're doing it in a way where the tools are presented to them, and it will be easier for them to connect in. Now there's a whole host of problems, potential problems that can come in with that, and I did a whole nother video about that, so I'm not going to jump into that today. But it is part of the conversation of living in different layers of reality, because when someone engages in astral traveling or psychedelics or things like that over and over and over without doing the integration, without grounding it in, it can become very ungrounding. It can become, I know a lot of people who do use these substances and they're very, very scattered. And again, it goes back to learning how to integrate all these worlds so that we can be effective in our mission. And to be effective in the mission, we have to be fully human. We have to accept our humanness in its fullness. And that can be very challenging to do. I mean, you guys know life is not always easy. Life is sometimes very challenging. But we came here to feel it all, to experience it all. And I was listening to Betsy Chassie this morning. She's in the middle of, launching our new book, All You Need Is Love, and she was sharing how, bypassing does not include the fullness of experiencing our humanness. And so as you continue on your awakening journey, I really invite you to remain grounded. Come back to center. Come back to your humanness. Come back to your heart. Come back to your soul. Yes, experience those higher realms, because you probably are a bridge of those higher realms to here. But when you experience the higher realms, also stay here. Don't leave. Don't leave your body to experience the other realms. Don't let your spirit wander away to experience those other realms and become, a shell of a human being. Stay rich in the fullness of your humanness while you explore and while you receive. A lot of the work that I do with, I call her my body whisperer, has to do with staying in my body and receiving the information from my human standpoint. I've had the tendency to go out and travel at night seeking or exploring or whatever the heck it is that I'm doing. And the work has been very powerful because it brings much more presence of my soul essence to this human reality. And that, to me, is the actual work. Bringing your higher self, bringing your soul essence, bringing your I am presence, integrating that and grounding that into your human experience. Because look, we came to this planet to have the human experience, to be creators as humans, and to be powerful as humans. And we can't do that if we're always astral traveling. We can't do that if we're always exploring psychedelics. We can't do that if we're, spacing out all the time. We must be focused on this reality, even though it's dense, even though it doesn't always feel good. Our jobs, the way I see it, our jobs are to bring in those higher frequencies and that ancient wisdom into this reality. So, I will read all of your comments once I stop the live. Sometimes if I read the comments, I get unfocused in what I want to say. So I will go back and respond to all your comments. Thank you so much for joining me today. I appreciate seeing you here, Heather, Stefan, Jim. Thank you for joining me on this live stream, and I'll see you in the next video, whenever that may be. Much love. Mwah.